Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session on how to do your low-code bot development using Bot Framework Composer. But before we start and dive into our topic, um, please let's say thank you to our sponsors, because without them nothing would be possible. And even more important, please don't forget to donate on the LightUp event page using the QR code shown here, because we all need to help children that are in need, and this is especially important in these weird times. But now let's dive into our topic, and let's have a look at today's agenda. We will focus on what is Bot Framework Composer anyway, and how you can do bot development on this. For this, we will do a little walkthrough through how you can deploy this tool, how you can do your first steps, and how you can create your first bot. And we will have a lot of demos around that. And to do that, we will install Bot Framework Composer, and after then we will go and create some dialogues and activities. And this is the main the main thing you can do using Bot Framework Composers, because maybe if you already got in touch with the Bot Framework before, initially there was dialogues and activities that had to be created on code, and now there's the low-code version of that, and this is one of the core components that you can make use of when using Bot Framework Composer. So this will be our main focus here, and when done, we will show you on how to deploy your bot to the cloud, which means we will deploy it to Azure Bot Web to an Azure Bot Web app in our sample, and we will go to Azure and a review on what is created when we use the deployment scripts which come with Bot Framework Composer. So you will have a short overview on what is available there and how to use it. And finally, you want to make use of your newly created bot in some application, such like a web page or a SharePoint page or Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever tool comes around. And we will do a basic introduction based on Microsoft Teams, so you can understand what you need to do in addition to composing your bot to make it all work and to implement it to, for example, Microsoft Teams. And then when you know how to use Bot Framework Composer to create your bot and what steps are required to deploy your bot, we will do a short resume. So I will include some lessons learned from my field, where you should take a note of when starting to use this tool, and some additional annotations at that. But first things first, who am I? Sandra already mentioned I'm working as a Microsoft Cloud Platform consultant at a company called Kramer & Crew here in Germany. I'm the community owner of several communities here in Germany, such as the Microsoft 365 user group here in Hamburg, as well as some technology meetups and student meetups, student technology meetups, which come around. And I'm mainly focusing on the product, on what's called a productivity cloud and an intelligent cloud service. When developing your bot with Bot Framework Composer, you first should be able to understand what is a bot anyway in terms of the Bot Framework Composer. And for this, I brought this little picture we can see at the right-hand side here. So you typically have a user interface, for example, on your iPhone or on your Android phone or on your Microsoft Teams app, which comes in with a dialog where you can see responses from other users or your bot together with an input field where you can enter your message which needs to get sent to that application or to the other users. And this is where bots typically integrate with a chat interface. And this is really important to understand because in the end, you will create responses based on text based on a text input, which can be sent by the user. So you can use this user input, that language, and process that language given by the language text given by the user to process it in your bot infrastructure. And to help you with doing that, Microsoft created something called bot service, which in this interaction mainly is focused by a so-called chat service, which comes as a bot framework connector application, and this one communicates and sends the user input and receives the bot's response to your actual bot infrastructure, and this is where your bot lives. The bot infrastructure in our case exists as a bot framework, as a bot web app, where our bot we created and deployed lives. So this is a very easy communication infrastructure that you should keep in mind once you try to develop your bot here and your bot infrastructure, and to connect it to some other service like Microsoft Teams or your custom web page, that you use the bot infrastructure to do all that magic that will be shown to the user. And Bot Framework Composer comes in to create all the dialogues here. That it can be graphical interaction using pictures and texts and buttons and so on and so forth. And in terms of a chatbot, you rather would prefer to use clickable items instead of just pure text. Both is possible, and we make it easy using mostly text. In my demo I have with me later, but please keep in mind that you may interact with the user not only like you do on WhatsApp, where you can just type a message from one user to the other user, but you may also enrich this message by using files and pictures and other things and multiple choice selection buttons, so you can be a little bit more attractive for the user, so the user will know what is expected from them to do and what option to click or what text to type. In addition, in the bot infrastructure, we can call anonymous API services. Such, in my case, I use a very common demo based on the Open Weather Map API, but you may also consider to use Azure AD Secured API. We have the option to create OAuth login from here to get access to those access tokens to go to those Azure AD Secured API. We can do some decisions and branching and consume existing bot framework capabilities. If you as a developer already developed something, you don't need to throw it away. We can reuse it. But as I mentioned, Bot Framework Composer is not here to develop your bot framework capabilities. Its main focus is to create the dialog flow that is shown in the end user's client. So the bot will, so the user will see what the bot will tell him and how the user will respond to that. Of course, there are some prerequisites to have. For example, you need to have a web browser. In my case, I will use Google Chrome later because I had at the current state of development of Bot Framework Composer, while on the one hand they say it's already GA, I still had some findings on my road. or when trying to develop my bots, when I tried to use something like my Microsoft Edge browser, even the Chromium-based Edge. So I would suggest to prefer Google Chrome against Microsoft Edge for the development. If you still can use the other browser, but from my experience, you will see some white pages without any text there. So in this demo, I will focus on Chrome as my user interface. To run this bot, you will need the current version of Node.js and Yarn. Because Yarn is used to install and build, as you can see here, and run the web server, which comes with the bot framework composer tool, and will run the web service and do all the magic in the behind to make it run. In addition, you also should have installed the bot framework emulator. This is not really required to develop your bot, but once you develop your interaction, you may want to see the effect of it. So for testing your bot and to have a testing interaction with your bot, you should make use of the bot framework emulator. Of course, you also need to install the .NET Core SDK. So before you run your bot run your bot framework composer to create your custom bot, you need to install that. For example, you should at the right moment make use of .NET Core SDK 3.1.106. If you go to the .NET Core SDK web page and, for example, try to make use of the patch delivered yesterday, please you can do this. The major version 3.1 is important here. The subversion doesn't matter for us when using bot framework composer, but please also keep in mind that in case you update the composer, maybe a .NET Core SDK update comes along with that. For running the services and to deploy the services later, you need to make use of PowerShell Core. I will show you an example in my demo examples based on PowerShell Core 7.5. This is where you run, for example, the yarn build or yarn start all commands to install dependencies, build up your bot, and start your user interface from a shell. As well as you will be able to run several deployment scripts to create and update your bots, to Azure once it's deployed. And for deployment, while I say you may make use of PowerShell Core, you will also need to install Azure CLI for deployment. It's not really required for creating your bot, composing your bot, creating the source code from the graphical interface, based on the graphical interface. While on the other hand, once you finish developing, you want to deploy it, and to do that, we make use of features from the Azure CLI to deploy our bot. And last but not least, when you finished creating your conversation flow, created all that great dialogues and API calls and so on, you may hand over your bot to your developer, and this person may add some special features or capabilities that were not available by using bot framework composer, because there maybe is already existing in development on that. At that point, it's really useful to have something like Visual Studio Code or your other favorite code editor with you, because Bot Framework Composer creates a folder scaffolding and puts source code in there, so you can so you will have a bot template that, including your dialogues, as a good starting point to what your developer will take to deploy, to create the final bot and deploy it to Azure and do some additional stuff if needed. So what are the first steps to do when you try to use it? Just go to the GitHub page. You can find the URL in my presentation for that. Clone the repository or download the zip from here, put it on a local folder, and it's really as easy as it's shown here. Just go to the composer directory and choose yarn to install dependencies, build your bot on your machine, and just start it all. So it will, Bot Framework Composer user interface will run on localhost port 3000, and there you will go with your browser to do all your ideas and all your magic. Let's go and check out how it looks like. To do that, I need to switch to a different computer. Let's say we use this one here. We just finished this yarn install and yarn build here, and now we go and say yarn start all to start the user interface and the bot framework composer created service, and when you just wait a few more seconds for this, it will tell us that we can go to localhost port 3000, and it will also create a runtime later for testing our bot once it is created here and started in addition. As you can see now, it asks us to go to a localhost port 3000. Let's do this. So now I will take my browser and go to that page. And now here we are, and we're good to go. Tool is up and running. Here we have the bot framework composer. At the left side, we have a home button. We have, once we started to create a bot or we opened an already existing bot, we have a bot icon here. So we can go and edit our dialog infrastructure here. We can create a new bot based on a template or from scratch. We do have a recent list which comes up with the last bot we created, as well as a history which shows some more bots we created during the last time. In my demo environment, of course, we only have the bot created for the session, as well as when you use this tool for the first time, it will come up with a short tutorial that you may consider to take. And as it's always a good idea to learn from what others created, you have some examples that the developers of Bot Framework Composer provide you to learn on how you can create your own bot based on something simple like just an echo bot. You provide user input, it echoes back what you typed in, a little bit like Eliza, or some other stuff like do your first steps with Lewis for language understanding. Lewis is not a part of Bot Framework Composer, but a lot of parts for language understanding and understanding what the user wants. Lewis is a really good tool to get there, so you will know even if the user rephrases the user input, how that you can be sure that the user will understand, and you will get the user's intent to do the proper action. So from here we can create a new bot. And as I mentioned, we can create it from scratch or from a template. But if this is the first contact with Bot Framework Composers, I will create a bot from scratch initially, so we can make sure we have a basic understanding of the user interface and the first steps, what's available here. And to do this, we need to provide some basic information. So let's say next, and now we need to provide a name for your bot. At this point, it's just a technical name, but you should go together between how you call your bot together with the name you type in here. So you can this makes it easier to find your bot later under the list of your bots, which bot does what, and which bot is it you're currently faced with. And as I said, Bot Framework Composer creates source code based on your dialog flow. So we also have to choose for a folder on your local machine where you run Bot Framework Composer, because it will put all that stuff like the runtime environment, source code, the language generation files, the language understanding files here. So you should remember where you saved your bot, so you can come back to that and add some development here later in case you need it. So for me, this is fine. So now it comes up with an empty page with your bot. You have a dialog structure here, over here at the left page, where we find our Lisa bot, and what's always there is an initial greeting with a sample greeting flow. But as I said, we don't have any rabbit in our head, so let's remove it for now. At that point, we have some interaction, so we can add new triggers. For example, a trigger is something like when user puts in their text, it tries to recognize by a pattern or by intent what is what does the user want you to do with your bot. So you can do just say I don't understand what the user tries to tell me. It's always a good idea to implement it, because your bot should be able to do one thing, but unfortunately it will be able to do this thing, but it won't be able to do anything you didn't code, as well as you will be able to fork to other dialog events based on what user explains to you, as well as you can may raise additional activities or some custom events from here, so you can get more fancy with your bot, add additional functionality, and so on and so on. But let's skip this for now. Now that we have a greeting, it's a good idea to, same as for a desktop application, to be really verbose with the user. So always let your user know where you are and what to do. So you can, for example, send a response to user telling, "Hello, user, great to see you." You can make your bot ask several questions to expect some response with text or numbers or a date or some multiple choice options. So you can go to your user and ask, "Hey user, which option should we use? Option 1, option 2, option 3? And depending on the user response, you can do the further action. You can create conditions. This is what is branching, very similar to Power Automate. So you can do some ifs and else decisions, or multiple option decisions, or loop. So if a user provides you with a list of responses, you can loop through each of that responses. So you can process each item for itself, for what do you want to do with the list. For example, if a user provides a long list of usernames, you can go through all the usernames to create or modify your users later SRD, for example, you can do some dialogue management, because oftenly dialog flows can get really complex. Think about all those forms you fill out to order your lunch package. And your pizza. There's a lot of questions, a complex dialogues for your name and address for the pizza you want to eat, on how you like to pay for your order, and to break down all that dialogues in smaller parts. And it's really recommended to do it in such a complex case like a pizza order. You have some possibility to manage your dialogues. For example, if a user tells you, hey, let's stop this action, you may want to end this dialogue. If something fails, you also may want to clean up or cancel your activities. Or if a user says, oh, something went wrong, we need to redo this, or let's do it for a different input, you may want to restart and redo all the magic you did. And here at the below, you may also want to get access to external resources. At this point, mainly we use sending an HTTP request to an external API. And in some cases, we may need to sign in and sign out to a service, so you can get login information from here or sign out to forget the access token for the proper API, and do some other stuff. And of course, at least you also have debugging options, so you can be very verbose to your to your log. So in case something went wrong, you can log to a file or log to the console what's currently happening. We won't choose this one here during this session, but please keep this in mind. During this session for debugging, we will have we'll review a different point. But let's create our very first bot just by saying hello, because everything you don't implement is not available. So now we choose the send a response action, and here's a new action appears on it. Like I mentioned, it's really similar to what you know from apps like Visio or Power Automate. And now you can build your process picture here. And with this box, there comes a new dialog here on the right hand side, which is written language generation. And language generation in this case means we have a leading dash, which is here for our response selector. So for example, if we tell a bot should start up and tell a greeting to the user, we can say something easy like hello user, and now comes a magic that comes with the dash. I can this is a response. I also can add another response by a second leading dash, telling the user hello. And so I can put many response types, and the leading dash works this way. This is a response, so in a random manner, it will take this response or that response for next. So it's not always prompting with the same hi user, hi user, hi user. Each time you start connecting to your bot and the bot is greeting you, but it will come up with one or the other response, so it won't be too boring to use your bot. When done, and once you created your user, so now you can add additional dialogues, but once you finish that, you can just start, or once we started this restart bot, so it's generating the code, compiling it, building and loading it to the web service we created when we ran yarn start all. And when finished, here comes a new button which tells you may want to test it using Bot Framework Emulator. So hopefully you already installed it when you before you deployed Bot Framework Composer on your machine. This takes a few minutes, but when it comes up, we are ready to go and test our bot. So we can just click on it and okay, looks like we need to handle some firewall issues. So if you do this on your development machine, please adjust your firewall policy so it won't block access to ports and communication which comes from your Bot Framework Composer. Let me say allow access here, and now we can go and open our Bot Framework Composer. Bot Framework Emulator, I'm sorry. And here is our bot coming up, and there's a few things to notice here. At the left-hand side, we have the communication, and our bot was told to, when a user connects, this is what the greeting dialog is for. Run into this this is a trigger action, and when you connect, do a greeting for the user and prompt for a text like hello. And to have this dash magic with the one response and the other visible in Bot Framework Emulator, you can reconnect to your bot just using the reload button here, and it will reconnect to the user and it will choose a different response. And it also will tell you some additional debugging info, like what happened with the bot connected. It will start a new conversation, because in Bot Framework under the hood, your bot activity is structured into conversations where you get a conversation ID. And inside this conversation that you're currently in, there is activities, and we may run into a special activity that we are faced with. So we have a state where we currently are, and this is always returned. And now we post some messages like these whatever we type into that box here. But for now, we only implemented a greeting. So whatever we type here, our bot won't do anything, because because we are already finished. We didn't implement more than the greeting. But I guess from this very little example, you can see some of the key concepts of Bot Framework Composer. You will create some trigger action, like you will model the greeting trigger action that is always there. So you will have a great user experience saying hello to the user. And after that, initial dialogue where you can ask, what's your name? And so on and so on. This is what the ask a questions items are for. And after getting and receiving some basic information on the user, you can add additional intents and additional dialogue from here. So you can go and do whatever your user wants you to do. One warning at that point, please remember, bots are used for small use cases. For example, if you go to Microsoft Teams, there is below the input field, there is message extensions. These are bots as well, and these can do only one action, get your user input. For example, if you click at the Giphy bot, at the Giphy message extension, it will ask you for what Giphy to show. So you type in the text, it will do a live search in the behind based on your user input, and it will deliver the icon. Nothing more, nothing less. So please try to get your bot really to match these small use cases. Don't try to implement a save the world bot just by using Bot Framework Composer or any other bot. And to do it a little bit more complex, I already did another bot from here. So let's drop our first example called Lisa, and let's go up and take an example and as you can see here. Now we have a light up bot. This one is called light up. And once again, we have a greeting dialog, but it looks like send a response is a little bit more complex here. We also implemented something called unknown intent. This is what I showed you before from you can either try to recognize a intent, or there's the default intent called unknown intent. I don't know what the user wants to do, so just let the be verbose and let the user know that you didn't understand him. Hopefully you won't always tell, this input I don't understand, next input I don't understand. If something like this happens, you need to handle that as well. But for now, we just tell you that we don't understand it. And as a small example, I took a weather use case for this. This weather intent trigger at this is defined by user puts in some message. We try to detect the text if he wants to talk about, for example, the weather, or wants to get his local weather report, temperature, rain, rain showers, and so on. You know, I'm from Hamburg. It's always raining here, and you can get a simple activity, for example, to get a user's location, to respond with how is the weather expected to be at your location, and so on. Before we go to the intents and how to detect language, we go back to the main dialog here. So we click on our bot, and with that, you define a recognizer type. Where you can choose from where you can choose from none. So no language recognition will be done at all. The user must exactly type what you intended him to type. Other people also call this a command-based bot. You have a syntax that you need to follow, and all that entities, the parameter objects that are expected to put in to come in from your user need to be located at places you defined, and there is no option for language understanding. So exactly the phrase you expect must be typed in the user dialog. You can do the same thing a little bit more advanced by using regular expressions, as I don't want to, as I want to focus on Bot Framework Composer and don't want to drift away, for example, for a language understanding service like Lewis. We will make use of this one during the session. And this allows you to create pattern matching for whatever the user types in. So you can use really complex regular expressions here. And last but not least, the most advanced is something like the language understanding service from Microsoft called Lewis that you can make use of. Lewis is a service where you can say, let's define an intent, and I will give you several utterances on how user may rephrase this intent. For example, if they ask, how old are you? There is an age intent, maybe it's an age intent that may also get rephrased as what's your age? How many years are you old, and so on. And if so the user doesn't really tells you what is with your exact phrase. You don't have any pattern matching, but you just rephrase it, and Lewis allows you to put all those phrases to your intent. So recognize, even though the user may rephrase it, and will get your entities anyway from your user input. But let's go back. I told you I will use regular expression for now. And this leads, for example, for a weather use case that I can say, a weather use case, I don't know what a user really types in. I did it really simple. I just I'm just looking for a text pattern called ether. So weather is fine, independent from if we have a capital W or a lowercase w, but we will catch it. And of course, as you may already have worked with a regular expression, you can do it a little bit more complex here. But in our case, this is all. So now we will go for a greeting, and we can for example, not only just send text like I showed you before, but we also can set action cards like having a title and a subtitle and a text and an image here, and some buttons that are typed as text to your bot response. And this is what you need to handle next. So for example, if there's written welcome, you need to handle that you welcome input back. Let's or for example, if we go for the weather, we can just put back some text and put a question for the bot that asks the user, for example, for a location. So we can define a property to catch that location, and based on that user input, you can send a response about, okay, I know you're now in this location. You can send an HTTP request, and once again, you can have this interpreted value from the user input in the address. So you have a user-based parameter here, and when done, you also need to specify what you expect as a response, so you can get a predefined object back. For example, if the API response was JSON, you also can already pass this, get this JSON passed as back to an object, so you can have a hierarchy for the object where you can get, for example, from a content object, from an array, something like a description about what is the weather here, and that's it. So once you put together these dialogues, you can just start your bot, and once again you can retest it. By the way, I used a picture in this dialog, but I don't own this picture. But it's publicly available from the Apple Store. So if you feel this pictures already came across with you from the Apple Store, yes, that's it. And now we can go and have a big nice picture with some text here, a subtitle and maybe additional text here, and a welcome button. And if I press that button, there is a text entered, which is defined by the button. And don't forget to implement that text. If you won't, you will come up with messages like this. Yes, there was an input, but I don't understand this input. So although I implemented a button, it don't know what to do with this once I press that button. And once again, you have more state information and some communication. And if I try to get from my intent, let's talk about the weather. It will recognize, okay, there is an ether token inside of this user input. So maybe I want to talk about the weather. So weather depends on location, where are you based on? And at that point, for example, possibly I'm in New York. So it will get back, it will send a response which includes my location. This is the interpreted string we had before in the send response now, and it calls out to the API and gets some additional information. So if it goes back to the object's properties, it also it also can tell me, okay, it looks like it's overcast clouds in New York. So we have a response from the API. And if you're located in New York, please watch out your window if this is the real world. So now as we have our initial bot, we can have a different step. As there is no questions in the Q&A for now, I will add some more 5 minutes from the for the final steps. Now we as we did our bot, we have our bot runtime created here, where we can find, for example, our light up bot dialog, and all the user input that we did in the GUI is coded to a file with the ending .dialog, for example, the light up bot dialog. And this is a file which implements your dialog infrastructure, your intents, what to send to the user, what API to call, and so on and so on. And in the early days of Bot Framework, you needed to code that manually. So now this is what Bot Framework is for, and this makes it really easy to create the dialogues. And I mentioned you have some deployment scripts here. So in the scripts, there is an option to deploy and provision your bot to Azure. So it will come up with a really easy deploying your bot web app as well as a connector. Let's go to our example here. And it will create the bot channel registration. This is what connects your bot to your target user interface, like Microsoft Teams. And it will create all that resources, especially the app service that runs your bot. And from here, you just go to your bot connector, and what you can do here is you can choose your channel where to connect to for your bot. For example, Microsoft Teams, a website, or even Cortana, because the language that is generated is also be possible to get a spoken response, not only a text response if needed. And that way you can get, for example, additional code and text on how to connect to your Microsoft Teams app and so on. So you can go back to Microsoft Teams, launch App Studio from there, and connect your bot to Microsoft Teams. Now that we have an understanding of how we create and maintain our bot, let's go back to the slide. I showed you there's a scripts folder from which one you can create and deploy your Azure deployment. So it will create all those resources. I won't do this in a live demo because it takes a little time to deploy that. So even in your own deployment, please take a little bit more minutes for that. And as you could see, it's a really good tool. Bot Framework Composer is a really good tool to create dialogues and in a really question and response dialogues. You can call out API, but it's a good tool to create dialogues. But you still may need to create the API in the behind that you may need to call, because it's sometimes not really easy to get API. Hey, if you imagine Twitter. So to handle that API calls, so you may also need to develop some Azure function, or in the session before we found some API, some additional API options for microservices. So you still need to add to create your custom API to get it, so you can call it from the Bot Framework Composer dialogues. And another really important thing that you could see from my example is even a very simple thing like calling out for the weather can get to a lot of questions and responses and API calls and so on. So please, please, please don't get confused with your dialogue infrastructure. Break down your complex process, your complex dialogues to smaller dialogues that you can handle. And like I mentioned, from my experience, when you use Bot Framework Composer, when using Microsoft Edge, even the Chromium-based Edge version, I had the experience that from time to time I can see only white pages, while when use it from the Microsoft Chrome browser, I can see content. So I rather recommend you to use Microsoft Chrome, to prefer Chrome over Microsoft Edge for use with Bot Framework Composer for now. And not written on the slide, but just as a side note, right now we can create C# source code for our runtime environment, but there's currently plans, if you go to the GitHub page and read all the issues and questions and requirements they currently faced with, they try to implement Node.js runtime environment as well. So if you're not familiar with C# but prefer Node.js to develop and using Node.js, or go out and watch out for upcoming versions, Node.js will come to you soon. Yes, and once again, as a final closing note is, please still don't forget to donate at the Light Up page, because children will need your help. And if you find this session useful, please respond at the speaker feedback page from the QR code found here, or even if you want to give response to the event, please feel free to choose the event feedback, so we can learn from your feedback and improve our sessions and event. And yes, that's all from me for now. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had a good time and learned for how you can do your first steps using Bot Framework Composer. Thank you.